Hey everybody, welcome to our channel. In this episode, we're going to be talking about respect, how it's rooted in boundaries, why it can bring up anger as well as other emotions, and more importantly, why it's such an important virtue in context to natural law in the cosmos. That's coming up next. Stay tuned. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thank you for stopping by the Wizard Factory video podcast, where you subscribe for weekly videos exploring deeper knowledge and understanding of the universe and yourselves. My name is Logan Hart.
And I'm Brian Easterday.
And RASPECT, find out what it means to me in this episode. That's what we're going to be talking about. A little soulful respect. You better respect this, because respect is everything to do with boundaries, and that's really where we can see anger is coming out of as well, and how these anger, respect, boundaries, sovereignty, these are all very much interconnected players in this concept, this dynamic that we're going to be getting into this week. If you're new to the channel, by the way, go ahead and subscribe. We got weekly videos coming at you, all kinds of topics, really useful knowledge material. Please like the video, give us a little boost, and let's get into this. First, as we like to do, take a look at some definitions. Respect is a really interesting word. You folks out there that may be familiar with Mark Passio's work, he definitely really, talks about this and the etymological breakdown of what this means. Which means to do again, to do something again, and spect, meaning to look at, like spectacles, or a spectacle is something to be seen. So to have respect means you're taking a second look. And this is pretty much where what Mark puts out there about this, but we want to take it a step further. Why look again? The why is very important. What is it that makes one look again? When someone says something like, I wouldn't give them a second glance, that's very much indicating this. What are they saying by saying that? It means that they don't respect that person. It means that they don't recognize them as either a threat or a potential ally, something that would benefit them, which means that's kind of indicating, what is that coming down to? Power. This person doesn't strike me as powerful, whether a positive or negative influence on me, and therefore I wouldn't give them the second look. I don't care. I can't be bothered with it, right? It's where you're kind of using your subconscious discernment there, but that's the actual metric that you're using to determine whether you would give someone, including yourself, a second glance. So
yeah, I love, as always, it's great to start with definitions, and etymology is such a useful science, because you really start to understand what you're really saying when you use certain words, and especially with like English, right? Because it's a language, it's such an amalgamation of other languages that, understanding each of the pieces really helps you understand the context of like the real essence and the energetic like charge behind that word. So, like you said, which is do again, and then spectare, to look again. So like it just to look again. So respect has nothing to do with making people listen to you or you controlling them or anything like that, which, a lot of times you hear parents say, I know that's something I heard growing up, like, oh, you just need to respect me, because like, well, a lot of times what they're saying, like their more meaning is like, you just need to listen to me, because if you were respecting someone, you could be taking a look at their actions again and still coming to the conclusion that what they're doing is incorrect. It's just, you took the time to look deeper at it. Right. So, very important to distinguish between respect and control, which we'll break down more here as we get into the episode.
Yes, and there's definitely a lot of kind of convolution and misinterpretation in the way this word shows up and the way this word is use. Another thing that kind of comes to mind is when Cartman says, "Respect my authority," because, and what is he doing in that episode? He's playing the role of a cop.
Right.
It's such a beautiful archetype. I love Eric Cartman as a archetype. And
yeah,
then
it's like a fat, ugly person dressed as a cop. It's perfect, you know?
with a total, like, inferiority complex that's then being projected
yeah.
Badge, like, respect my authority, which it's funny because that's the thing, is it's not actual respect. Respect may be what their soul and their heart is actually craving underneath in that mess of pain and, you know, anger and all that that's beneath the surface, but that was created a state of dis-ease, probably through some kind of traumatic experience or upbringing or aspect of childhood or something like that. But again, that word respect in that context is not being properly used. And like, let's get into why that is. So again, respect is kind of born out of true power. And when someone violates you, or whether a one-time thing or just literally like the relationship you might have with your parents, where they're constantly not respecting your sovereignty, your wishes, your well-being, your boundaries, that's going to create a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, and that's natural, that's normal. That's what those emotions are there to tell you. This is uncomfortable because this is wrong. I'm not being respected. You don't just shun that emotion. You don't say, oh, you know, anger's negative, I shouldn't feel that, something's wrong with me. No, you're correct. Your anger is correct. But anger can also be misguided. So the cop gets angry when somebody talks back, doesn't respect their authority, because actually because it's not true respect. Fearful domination is never the way to get actual respect, because it's a false sense of power. So again, tying it all back to this dynamic of power, is it's there, either someone is truly angered out of a true violation of boundaries, sovereignty, or they're falsely perceiving it as such through a feeling of lack of control, because simply someone is not complying with their wishes. And that makes them feel angry because they feel disrespected, when actually that person is respecting themselves by saying no to you. That's the interplay of boundaries. Is like, it's like where you end is the same as where they begin, and you need to see that interplay, that relation.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, it does just come down to, like so many things, boundaries and looking at other people. And this is one of the things that we, on the show, we talk about all the time, is boundaries and sovereignty and free will. And when you respect yourself enough to, like, that you've reflected on yourself enough to say that, like, I deserve to have these things. I deserve to, like, live my life freely and not have some authoritarian system dominating me and telling me, like, what to do. I deserve to be in a healthy relationship. I deserve to have a career that I enjoy. You start respecting yourself in that way. Then you will also recognize that others deserve that as well. Because if you recognize that you're a sovereign individual with free will and that you have that self-respect, you'll automatically have to then, if you don't want to be hypocritical, if you want to be consistent in your logic, you have to recognize that others are also sovereign and have their free will, and they deserve that same fucking respect.
Exactly. It really comes down to that feeling of powerlessness, because what is that initial either single event trauma or a repeated dynamic of being treated, you know, less than deserving of that sovereignty? It creates a feeling of powerlessness, because that power of who and what you are is not being respected. And your wishes is a form of desire. It's a form of control, and control is not always a bad thing too. That's another one of those total new age bullshit myths of let go of control all the time and just surrender and blah, blah, blah. There are times to submit and surrender and let go, but that's not like, oh, if you're just holding on to anything, then you're not fully enlightened yet. Like, like literally life would be utterly meaningless and futile if you had no control. Because I mean, as simple as like where you choose to live, what food you choose to put in your body. Those are forms of control. You are making those choices. So, control comes with freedom and sovereignty. You can't be truly free if you're powerless to control and make those choices to navigate and create the life experience that your soul is wanting to play out in order to grow.
Right. And it's just, as with anything, like we talked about with our chaos and order episode, control is not inherently good or bad. It's essentially like a neutral kind of a thing. The key for you to learn is to learn your self-control, and that you understand where you have the right to make a decision, and that, the moment you start trying to control others, that control has then become toxic. And whether that's done through a forceful, controls, and keep in mind, unhealthy control and manipulation, that's not just done through like physical force or intimidation. More often than not, it's done through emotional manipulation and things like this, or telling, like we talked about in our episode with the spiritual, narcissism, and the parasites. They will emotionally manipulate. Like they'll try to go through your heart in order to control your mind. And that's the same thing we see, like what the system does, like with the whole, what everything's going on in the world now with the COVID thing. What's happening? They're playing on people's compassion. Like the people that are doing that, they're saying like most of them are wearing their muzzle because they feel like they're helping somehow, or they don't want certain people that are old to get sick and die. Like it's coming from a place of like compassion, but it's twisted and manipulated and used to the point that they become mind controlled through it. It's that access through the heart. So that emotional manipulation, many times that's very, very subtle, and it's not as hard to spot, but it's also one of the things that, like, when I see it, it's something that very much, like, I get, that righteous anger that we're talking about here, this anger that comes out of respect, that's where you can get, like, because if you see someone trying to manipulate you, the respect you have for yourself will create that righteous anger, And if you see someone else being manipulated by another, it should also do the same thing, because someone else's boundaries being violated should upset you just as much as like your boundaries being violated, because it's the same rule applies. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And that, being able to have empathy and compassion and put yourself in someone else's shoes is what allows you to then have that righteous anger when you see someone else being harmed or being violated, to say that, no, this isn't okay. Because sometimes people can't see that for themselves, and it doesn't mean you need to go around and be everyone's savior. But for example, like a person who they're not capable of it, like a small child or something, right, like that, right? They're, them being manipulated or them being controlled or abused or something, they won't necessarily always have the cognition there to figure out or to see what's going on all the time. And if another great thing in the world, we see like pedophile rings being exposed, right? With like the release of like the Epstein documents and things like that. And what's happening? People are getting pissed off, and it's a good fucking thing. We're seeing a wrong being done. We're seeing boundaries being violated, like children being abused, and then people are getting angry because of it. Like this is the energy we're talking about here, in this episode. And that essentially comes down to like a lack of respect for those individuals. It's continued because a lack of respect for just how the world works that the general public has, that most people have been okay to just walk with blinders on and not look, but all of a sudden, that's being removed, and they're having to look again at what's going on, and then the anger's coming out of that. And
that's a product of a lot of gaslighting. Think about it, with gaslighting, there's it's still a two-way street. There's the one doing it, but there's the one who's eventually accepting it. Like that's why it becomes a problem, is because eventually the victim starts accepting that in truth that's being imposed on them as more important or more worthy of respect even. And like, yeah, someone who's operating from the wounded ego views weakness as something to not be respected. It's just like, get away from me, like swatting at a fly. It's literally that same kind of care, like you don't respect the fly. It's just annoying. Like, get out of here. You don't have any real power other than to just slightly annoy me. So get the fuck out of here. Like that's that kind of false respect dynamic that is kind of a sign of the predator mindset. Again, that I talk about, that whole dog eat dog kind of thing is like you only respect that which has a potential threat to your own power, like something that's going to take you out and take your place and reap all the benefits of your hard work. That scarcity mindset, fear-based, seeing everything as just like, if I don't conquer this, then it's going to conquer me. That's literally that mindset in a nutshell. So it's important, like that's not operating from true heart-based intelligence. That's a lower form of truth, like we talked about before, of like this idea of higher and lower truths. There's truth to it. It works in a way, just like, well, if I need money, I could just rob someone, right? It works, right? Well, yeah, that's true, but it's a lower truth because, like you were saying, Brian, that's it's ignoring the logical fallacy of treating someone else as in a way that you would not want to be treated. Literally, no one could possibly want to have their free will violated or their property stolen, because to even say that, you're already defining it by not consensual. So that's really the crux of morality. It's not that everyone values things the same way. It all comes down to that consent factor.
Right.
And so essentially you could consider that in most cases that any kind of anger is coming out as a result of someone's sovereignty and power not being respected, whether that's your own or someone else's. That could be in the form of your time, your boundaries, your emotions, your property. Like if someone's like holding some expensive thing you own and just kind of like tossing it around, like you'd get a little bit angered because they're not respecting that. And that's, it's playing into that lack of control, because we can't control people. They may do things we don't like. So,
right.
It's about dealing with these emotions in a healthy way, and understanding that, first of all, the emotion itself is not wrong, and you're not wrong for feeling it. It's more in how you choose to act on it. And that's why, you could very much see anger as a masculine energy. It's something that moves you to take action.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's, like with that example that I was mentioning, like if we what we see going on in the world, like with things like that anger, it's motivating people to want to take action, to want to expose it and things. Because there are, those of us who have been in this kind of world for a little while, these are things we've known about. We've been trying to tell people for years, but a lot of the general public and things, it was only in the last couple of years that kind of stuff came into where they were really aware of it, and so they're having to kind of like start looking at those things, and we start seeing a lot of people developing that anger because of that, but it's leading them to want to take action and, to see it resolved and see those people exposed. And so that, that is an example of seeing how that anger can be used in a proper way. You can also kind of get into the toxic forms of like wanting to demand respect. And again, I think there's like two layers to it. There's one, respect is being confused with like control or submission. And two, that need to have that control or submission that you're wanting from people is actually coming out of a need, of the want for real respect, but you just don't even know what that is. So you're confused and you don't even know what you want. If you're the type of person like, the example, like a very like toxic person saying like, like, why are you disrespecting me? But in a, just like that, if you can just imagine like some douchey guy, like at a bar or something like that. No, you looked at me wrong. Why are you just, you know what I mean?
Or to his woman, like obviously, like
right.
Someone he perceives as weak and powerless and can't really stand up for themselves, because women do tend to struggle more with saying no and having boundaries, because women just want connection and they want easygoing, like everything to be just nice and breezy. Yeah. So it's a false projection of that, their misinterpretation of their own feelings, and then they're just projecting that false, kind of coming out of that false assumption of fear equals respect, because it wasn't shown to them when they needed it the most, and now they're just carrying that around with them. And rather than actually trying to connect and earn true respect, which is what it actually is, they're confusing that with fear and demanding, well, is that if everyone just fears me, then, you know, like I get what I want and I'm respected and like no one will dare stand up because it's the total false, like the wrong approach to it. It's like it's like a dark form of respect almost, because true leadership, it's in the name, leadership. True leaders gain followers by leading. They go first. They lead by example. They offer value without asking anything in return. And because they're not coming from that scarcity mindset and that fear-based mindset to control, people will naturally want to help support them and like help them gain, you know, like accomplish their own goals, because they know if they've bought into who is this person, what is their heart really after. If you've bought into that and you've come to trust that person, then you want to help them achieve their goals, especially if they're helping you in the process, versus respect being demanded. And a true leader has no desire within them to actually elevate themselves above other people. They're not looking for a throne. They're not looking for a pedestal. They're lifting other people up, and then other people are then lifting them up, versus the complete opposite of the fear-based mindset. You know, and like just one quick point, you can definitely see this on display with the Christian mindset. You know, you often hear Christians say the fear, put the fear of God in them, or he was a good God-fearing man, like it's some kind of virtue to fear God. That's just so indicative of what a psychopathic, you know, authoritarian Jehovah is in the text.
I like that you highlighted that where the need of like a person who is trying to control, or because they feel like they need to be respected, but they're really going after control because they have their own false assumption that they've been, of their own feelings that they've then projected out. It's very much like they have this void or this hole that they're trying to fill, like kind of like an addict, right? You know, an addict, they have a void or a hole, like, or emotional need they're trying to fill, and they think that drug or that substance is going to do that. Well, with these type of people, that they have a void or a hole of where they're wanting to be seen and to be heard and ultimately accepted. But because they don't really know what that is, because they don't understand cosmic law and boundaries and sovereignty, they are then trying to fill that void with a toxic version of something they think will solve it, but it ultimately won't. You know, they're addicted to trying to demand attention from everybody, because deep down, like that inner child says, like they just feel like they're not seen and heard, and that's ultimately what they want. Ultimately, it's what we all want. We want to be accepted, and we can see with respect. If you want to look at the rune Gabo, the very good rune to understand respect. It's mutual exchange, and that's the thing with Gabo, is that, you know, it has to go both ways, and with respect, it has to go both ways. Like you can't, if someone is disrespecting you, you can't really respect yourself letting them do that. So for you to respect yourself, and to respect it, you know, like you have to be able to do both at the same time, you know. So it definitely is an energy of that has to be like brought in and used with balance, because like I said, if it's not, and one person is just like trying to dominate or control another and put them into submission, that's not Gabo. So it's not true respect. Because like I said, if we're all wanting to be seen and heard and ultimately accepted, you know, we can see that with Gabo, that like, you know, we want to be accepted. So like, you know, then, you know, others will want to be accepted as well. We can see that reflection. So, you know, there's so much to look at this. When you start to look at the different versions and how it can come out, because the need to be accepted and heard and seen, that's not inherently wrong. They're just going about it they're just going about it in the wrong way, you know, and that's it. Like you just need to shift your tactic if that's the kind of behavior that you have, and you need to learn. You need to understand boundaries and sovereignty and free will, and then learn respect. And respect other people just as much as you want to be respected.
Right, and because it's born out of that fear-based scarcity mindset. That's why it's this, like, it's like Gollum, like I need it, it's my precious. But you see, it's completely eroding all the you know, the goodness from them. And
Respect. Like
yeah, I really think you hit the nail on the head. I really think you hit the nail on the head when you compared it in with the addict thing, because this is actually a huge concept that I've been kind of like observing myself in the parallels of really addiction and the many forms that it actually takes, not just the limited forms that we often first think of, like somebody jamming a needle into their arm or maybe going to a casino or something like that. Those are very stereotypical, but there's so many things that people, you know, an addiction is just like you said, it's an action or a behavior or an activity that gives you a temporary and almost artificial satiation of an emotional need. But that emotional need, at its deepest core, everything that we do always comes down to the desire to connect, because it's the human version of this big kind of etheric concept that we talk about where the universe trying to awaken unto itself and experience itself. That's great and all, but how does that apply? Human connection. Every relationship, whether positive or negative, is some way of coming to know thyself better, because every person is a walking mirror of you. All of the out there and all the in here is present in every individual. And that's always playing out. So by disrespecting others, you're disrespecting yourself. By disrespecting yourself, you're disrespecting humanity and all of our potential and the potential of other people to completely act, because your choices and your lifestyle have an influence on everyone else around you. And it's the people that are most obsessed with being respected that are projecting that lack of true power onto others. They're the most powerless, because they're seeking that need like a fix. And ultimately, whether, you know, drugs or you know, Netflix or food or controlling other people, whatever it is that gives you that sense of validation, like, okay, I am powerful, I can do this and that, it's never the way, because it's not real. It's literally an illusion that is toxic and self-destructive and also destructive to others. So ultimately, there's no replacement for true connection. And again, that's that difference between leadership versus like a boss or an authoritarian, is that it's out of true care that they're acting, out of true care for themselves, for goodness, for truth, for others, that they're acting. Everything that they do is rooted in that, versus that lack of respect in the other type of person. That's going to be infecting and perverting every single thing that they do as well. It's playing into that trivium process that's playing into what's actually being manifested. So it's extremely important.
Well, and yeah, and I like that you brought up that if you know, we don't respect ourselves, then that's going to then impact the world. Like if you're not really respecting yourself, that you're not really respecting constant. And you can see how this plays out when you're looking at like statism, right? So people who are submitting to systems, or even like religious systems like the Abrahamic, it's that fundamental lack of self-respect of their own sovereignty, their own boundaries, their own free will, that they don't actually think they deserve the right to be able to choose for themselves. They literally think they have to be controlled and dominated, and that they need to respect that dominator. They need to fear that dominator. But that's coming out of a lack of self-respect. If they had that self-respect in the first place, they want to be advocating for those control systems, those religious belief systems that are taking that away. So that really is something that's very true. That like if you truly want to respect like humanity as a whole and see society grow, like it has to come down to the level of the individual, and it has to start with your own self-respect. And the awakening process, it is a process that begins with self-respect, because what are you doing? You're starting the process of looking at yourself again and reflecting and learning and refining yourself. Like, so awakening and self-respect, they go hand in hand.
And respect, again, is born of power. You know, like think of something like a gun or a car or, you know, mushrooms. You respect those things because they have great power for both positive and negative, depending on the outcome. you don't want to go wielding something with great power if you don't know what the hell you're doing. You're going to cause a lot of damage and suffering in the process. So again, it's important to recognize power needs to be wielded properly, and also controlling others through fear is not true power. And that's extremely important because, again, we've been talking about this. Truthers, they tend to put the psychopathic elite, or whatever you want to call them, on that pedestal of, oh, they're all powerful and they can do all this and that. And yes, there's truth to that level of power that they have, but the power of self, the power of sovereignty, absolutely obliterates this false control structure that they've created. That's exactly why it's a house of cards. The second everybody starts taking their power back and saying, hell no, it just is going to blow away into dust. And that's really, it's like the power is there, but it's an illusion. It's like a bad dream. It can make you feel scared and disoriented, but yet it's not real. It didn't really happen to you. And as soon as you stop thinking of them as all powerful and, you know, they control the world and all this kind of thing, and see, it's not that that's false, but you see the higher truth to it, you're going to become more powerful than you ever could have, and become the very thing that takes their power away, because they've built their empire of power not on their own power. They've built it upon the backs of the ones that truly have the power. That's why they need us more than we need them. It's why in the Matrix, they just see us as a battery. But it's, I mean, what happens when you take the battery out of something? It's dead. They're game over.
Well, and like we were talking about, those who are trying to control others in such a way because they need that power. It's because they're coming from their own disempowerment. So you really see how weak they really are when you look at that. And, you know, I like that whenever you said turn dust, I had an interesting synchronicity. I had like a lot of ashes from my fire getting like blown up, like blown in front of me right when you said that. So I don't know, interesting. Yeah, you know, and the people like the people with self-respect, they won't tolerate disrespect. So like what's going to happen? Like a person that has self-respect, they'll generally try to bring it up and address it with that person in a healthy way. And then if it's still like that person still doesn't correct their behavior, you don't deal with them anymore. You just get them out of your life. You put up that boundary. You know, it's only a person who doesn't have that self-respect that will continually let someone like violate them over and over and over again. You know, rather than just saying like, okay, I'm going to address this with you. And these are my clear boundaries. And this thing boundary, the clearer you get, the better they work. It's just like in magic. The clearer you get with your intention, the more effective it is. It's the same thing. So when you get really subtle on what your boundaries are and like what is okay and what is not okay, once that's communicated to someone and then they, you know, they say they acknowledge that, if they then continue to violate those, that's all you need to know about that person. That person doesn't keep their word. So cut them the fuck out of your life. That's
they
not
don't actually respect you.
Around. They don't actually respect you. So why should you? What happens then is like you need to have that self-respect enough to say that, like, you know, fuck you. Like you're not going to do that to me. Like that's an act of self-respect.
And it's like we were talking about the other day, where most of the time people that are like that, they're predatory. They're the authoritarian type of. They're looking for that elevation. They're fucking cowards deep down. Most of the time, you saying no, they will just back down. They will cower away. They'll find an easier host because that's what they want. They have no power. Why are they going to waste energy looking or like fighting when there's plenty of easier fish in the sea? That's what they're looking for. But not always. Sometimes you have to get firm. And that's a skill in and of itself. It's like a muscle that you have to strengthen. I went through it myself. For a long time of my life, I erred on the submissive type. I didn't like confrontation. It gave me extreme anxiety. I really hated saying no or bringing up uncomfortable situations and conversations. But eventually, the more I practiced, the easier it got. And then it's not as much of a big deal because not only is, oh, well, I said no, and like a meteor didn't fall on me, or like I didn't burst into flames or something like that. Like I'm still here and I'm okay. Like
Right.
it wasn't so bad. But also your self-respect and your self-care is going to grow if you're on this path. Every year grows more and more. And that is also fueling your ability to say, you know what? Because here's the thing. Typically these people that like was me, errs on that side of submission, tend to be very empathic. So a lot of what's playing into that is I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to make them uncomfortable. So you're just like harakiring yourself again and again, just taking that on because you don't want to delegate it to someone else. But guess what? You're only further empowering yourself. You're disempowering them because you're not allowing the natural law process to take to aim. You telling somebody to fuck off because they didn't respect your boundaries, that's a hard lesson that they need. They need to feel that sting of, oh shit, like maybe I overstepped. Maybe I need to rethink. Maybe I need to respect. Maybe take another look at myself.
Right.
And
there you
give
go.
them that gift.
Right. Yeah, I really love that you brought up the empath thing. So one of the things like in relationship astrology I've been studying is really the play just in general between the masculine and the feminine. And in astrology, you can look at the different elements. So fire and air are associated with masculine qualities, and then water and earth are associated with feminine qualities. So water can get pushed around, right? Sometimes it can be very forceful and overwhelming, but it can also sometimes, be easy to push or direct. So if you're stuck too much in the water element of the feminine, that's where you start looking at like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to like upset her. Like I'm a Pisces ascendant, so I very much relate to what you're saying, that it took a long time for me to learn boundaries and things, because I would be thinking about what those other people are feeling and not wanting to upset anybody else, because, I felt so deeply and ultimately I didn't want to upset. So I was trying to extend that respect out to other people, but it wasn't it's because that wasn't ever fully given back, because I wasn't starting with my own self-respect, right? I was allowing too much of what others are thinking and feeling to influence like what I'm doing. And then you can get stuck in that, to where you, that's the element of the earth. Like when the earth gets, there's too much of the earth element with the feminine, it can lead to stagnation. Okay. So where you get stuck in that cycle. So boundaries, they should be backed up and empowered by the feminine care, but the action of it is a masculine action. So you can see why, like with empathy, like with that watery element and letting others, that feminine can have an issue learning how to learn those boundaries, because it's that masculine energy that you have to learn to tap into in order to like recognize it and then enforce it and take action on it.
Yeah, like what struck me here was like, think about like a pitcher, a water pitcher. That feminine is the water. Water has so much value and power on its own, but what does it need? It needs a container. It needs something to give it form. Otherwise, it just splashes all over, gets everything wet. What is that pitcher? It's your boundaries. It's the shape. It's you. Here's me. Here's where I am, and here's where I ain't. And take a good look, because I'll remind you, like we talk about with the Thorisage, when you're dealing with Thor or a thorn, thorns aren't going around attacking people. They only hurt you when you violate them, when you come into their space and don't respect. Ooh, I see thorns. I might want to second guess. Like, this is a person that knows how to say no. Again, most of the time a predator is going to see that and they'll be like, on to the next. I'll find someone like kind of limping or, something like that. Like, they're looking for that easy prey. So it's not even that you have to turn into some raging, warrior of lightning and thunder. You just need to know how to say no and stick with it. That's the other thing about boundaries too. It's extremely important, especially like in context to parenting. Sometimes one time is not enough. You not only need to communicate and show your boundaries, but stick by them. Don't like draw a line here and then they come right up to it and then you're like, okay, well, maybe right here then. Oh, no, maybe right here or maybe right here. And you just keep backing down, like, because they're looking for that. Especially think about children. They're always testing that electric fence for the weak point. Like, can I do this? Oh, I'm not getting in trouble. Oh, I'll do more. Versus like every time you're like being consistent. That's what's going to really instill good, proper behavioral self-awareness in a child.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. Yeah, because Blaine gave me like a good example of that the other day. I like had him out on the trails, and like we were going for a walk, and part of the trails there's like a river down below, and it's kind of like a sharp drop like right off it. And he was wanting, and it was like wet, and he was wanting to run in the grass, but I didn't want him to like fall down there and end up in the water or whatever. So I told him, I was like, you got to stay on the path. Well, this kid, being his honorary little self, like looks at me, grins, goes right to the edge of the path, and just starts like walking right down that line. And it's like, I'm not in the grass, but and like he's just 2.5. He's just a little toddler, but he, kids recognize that, and they like to push that and test that, and that's a good thing to want to push and to explore and find things, but you have to balance that back out with like when you do discover certain things, someone else's boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
You back off, you recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you realize that you can't just extend yourself out and project yourself out onto everybody else.
Yeah. I can even think of like, again, we're all about getting away from black and white thinking, absolute, like, all or nothing kind of thing. Like I could even say, I think that it's okay to even some degree test people's boundaries if you're coming from a true place of care. Because sometimes you can encourage someone to do something that's a little outside their comfort zone, but then they end up like actually thanking you for it. You know what I mean? Like just because it's not that you're like, okay, point a gun at them and say, like, we're going skydiving right now, like whether you like it or not, but just giving a little resistance. Like, I don't know, like, try, like, keep an open mind, so you might like it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Yeah, and especially if it's done in an intentional way, if it's something that like they'll get a lot of value from or something, and it's not that like if they don't want it and they just keep saying no, well then you respect that and you don't and you just move on. But yeah, that's an example like with having a friend that like you have that established rapport with. I think that would also be something to consider, is that it's like you're doing this with a person you have an established rapport with, and then you're like, yeah, like come on, like. Just try this or whatever a little bit, just that like little friendly like nudge, but that can also very much like help someone expand or look at something that they might have been a little bit resistant to before, that it could very much benefit them. But again, like that nuance and that awareness comes in, and it's also you will be testing their boundaries, but not to the point that you're violating them. Right. So that's the distinction to make. You're not, like it's definitely something to look at. And again, like Logan said, we stay out of black and white thinking. Like that's the worst thing you can do, is get trapped in that. Be able to see the nuance in things and have discernment to see all the individual parts and recognize them like each is an individual and how they work together.
Mm-hmm. Conscience, science, with sciere, with knowing. It's you're using your discernment. It's that intellect that's the blade. It cuts through. It separates. That's again with the new age crap of like duality is the old way, and like we should be going like. I get where they're coming from, but again, that's why the intellect is a divine, beautiful tool that you should be using. And as an extension of what I was talking about earlier, this false idea of respect, which is actually just fear, it's essentially Stockholm syndrome is what it actually is. So in the same way that people kind of brag of like, I'm a good God-fearing man, they say, I'm a law-abiding citizen. Like that's some kind of thing to be proud of, when you're really just like basically saying, I'm a coward that just does what I'm told because I don't want to make waves. So especially in anarchist circles, you hear things like, only bad ideas require force. And I happen to agree. I mean, obviously, you can't take that in a blanket statement because, well, if you're requiring force to defend your boundaries, that's acting in alignment with truth, not out of alignment. So the idea is initiating force in the context of what the government does. It's like, this is, let's make a law. When people say there ought to be a law blank, that what they don't realize that they're saying is literally, my idea is so good that in this way that people ought to behave, that I actually justify force being initiated upon them if they don't do this thing. And most people don't realize that that's what they're actually implying when they're talking about anything the state does is not a suggestion, it's coercion. So just obedience is not a virtue. And Stockholm syndrome does not make you spiritual. just because you're proud of being subservient to this supposed authority that you should be respecting, but yet true respect is out of care, true care. You cannot have a healthy relationship with someone that doesn't respect your boundaries, does not respect you as a person. It's impossible. That's a natural law. If you want to add one to the growing list of hermetic principles or whatever, like there's one for you. You cannot have a healthy relationship that's based on control, fear, and a lack of respect for true personal sovereignty.
And a person who, like, say in a toxic relation, who is doing that kind of like level of disrespect and things, that it's consistent, they're not going to change overnight. So like, that's something to learn. Like if people are at some kind of level of a lack of awareness, part of the understanding the awakening process is realizing that it's just that, it's a process, and it's not done instantly. And that's why when you see people disrespect you in that kind of a level, it's just best to get out, of that relationship or that job or that friendship or whatever the dynamic is. The same thing applies. Something that should be noted is that the people who are like demanding respect the most, a lot of times, like in an unhealthy way, they're the ones that like are constantly disrespecting others. So they shouldn't really be surprised that because they don't disrespect others, they don't get that respect that they're actually seeking or they're wanting. Again, like it has to start at like the level of individual. You have to respect yourself, which then leads to you respecting other people. And if you don't have that, or you don't respect other people, then you should not be surprised at all when they just start cutting you out of their life, or they don't want you around, or they don't want to listen to your opinion or deal with your, emotional outburst or whatever it is, that these type of people who are like demanding their respect, it's like a little child or a little toddler, like screaming and demanding for attention that they just feel like they're not getting. And they want it right then, and they want it now. And then, they're willing to, like, I don't care what other people want or what they're doing. I'm just going to demand it right now. And children, they don't have that level of awareness to realize it's what they're doing. Just like these people, even though they're adults, on an emotional or a spiritual level, they're children, and they don't have the awareness to even realize that they're doing that a lot of times. So if you allow that to continue, like you said, you're doing them a disservice. And the best thing you could do a lot of times is to tell them to get fucked, that like, this isn't going to be allowed. Like, I'm not going to deal with this, because if you get cut out of somebody's life, it creates that, like, oh, okay, there's that little bit of reality check that maybe I have to respect myself a little bit. I have to take the time to look again.
Oh yeah, dude, when you were saying that, this hit me really hard. And I think this is probably going to hit a lot of the viewers out there right in the feels, because this is a very common experience for young children, especially in the world where many people that are parents are still, at least emotionally, still children themselves. So they're still operating on the emotional operating system of a 6-year-old, and yet they're training other small children of how to operate in the world. It's that cycle that is perpetuated. Well, get this. If someone's operating from their wounded ego, as most people are, then oftentimes what's the best way for a child to get the attention that they're craving? If a child is, for the most part, feeling neglected, ignored, not valued, then they're going to get attention any way they can. Well, if their parents are walking around in their wounded states, the ego brain, especially on overdrive, is always looking for mistakes, something to pick apart, something to harp on. So in a sick, twisted way, the child actually learns that, oh, if I just act out, or if I just do something wrong, that's the best way for me to get attention from my parents. And then that's what I'm going to equate to mommy and daddy love me. So when I do this, I get the love that I'm craving. So I'm also wiring my brain from like doing something wrong or acting out from an inauthentic place to, this is how I get love, and this is how I can give and receive love. And then you're going to be playing that program out on repeat for the rest of your life until you become aware of it. And it's going to cause so much unnecessary suffering for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's an excellent point. Cause that's exactly what's happening, is it's playing out that wound of that inner child. And because they're not aware of it, they're going after that. They would rather have that negative attention. So in a toxic relationship, it'd be like, oh, you need to, I'm really angry and you need to listen to my feelings because I'm not feeling heard, but to the point that you're doing that all the time that your partner can't do anything else with their life. And like in my previous relationship, right? Like, that was one of the issues is like, she would be just so demanding or so like, just want that kind of the way that like she would constantly disrespect me or like, interrupt me while I'm working or whatever, like, and very rude, as you've experienced, Logan, not very pleasant about it at all. It was very, that kind of demanding attention right then and there. But that was, essentially that's what it was playing out though, is just that, there was like, inner child wounds and things like that, just like I was playing out like my own version of having kind of be raised in a family where you have to learn how to kind of navigate around, or you almost get used to allowing your boundaries to be violated because like, if you try, like you were so little, if you tried to stand up for yourself at the time, it would have resulted like in you like getting the shit beat out of you, or whatever other like fucking punishment they came up with at the time, so you have to learn to like survive to kind of navigate, but then that what is a survival mechanism at the time goes into that like that formative programming into the subconscious, the unconscious mind, and then that cycle gets played out over and over again, and especially like childhood traumas like that, those will especially get played out in romantic relationships, because that's where we're really starting to, that's where you start to see a lot of your childhood programming and things come out, is in when you get into like a toxic relationship or something like that, because it gives you the chance to highlight those things. And that's part of the learning experience, is going through some of those and learning like what you don't want, because then you'll know what you do want,
Yeah. And what's interesting there too, is think about it. If you're projecting your way of relating to your parents and the way that and that's how you've learned to give and receive love. So even in a toxic way, you're going to be projecting that into your relationships. Well, think about when you're a child, you don't really have the option to cut your parents out of your life. You literally need them for your survival. They feed you, they give you a home and all this kind of thing. So it makes sense why later on down the road, it becomes hard for people to fully cut people off, because they're very hardwired for that codependence that they had with their parents, where it's a very different situation when you're cutting somebody out of your adult life. You have that ability to, you've earned your own autonomy, your independence, so you don't need, you're able to cut people out and you'll still be okay. And that's, again, something you're only going to learn through experience by, like I said, oh, I did it and I didn't die. Wow, that actually wasn't so bad as I thought it was going to be,
Yeah, I really like that you brought up that, the autonomy, that you depend on the parents for survival, because you see that same need can play out like when people get stuck in an abusive relationship, that a lot of times they feel like they don't have the option. Like it may be a woman and she has like kids with the man, or whatever. And, he has all the money and he doesn't let her work and she's just at home trying to take care of the kids. And they depend on her survival, just like that child depend on the parent. Well, now she's that parent and she wouldn't have the choice but to just, take care of the kids and things, or it may seem like that. And then trying to get a job or trying to leave because like, oh, she needs that house provided for. She needs to be able to feed them or whatever it is. It's still that need for survival, that when people get stuck in that fear base or they feel that lack of power, like we were talking about earlier, they then allow themselves to be disrespected. So we can see these cycles play out in, whether it's like you receiving it as a child, but then how that could also play out as an adult when you're kind of stepping more into that role your parents were in, but you're falling into that same cycle. It's very interesting things to observe, but it does all come down to self-respect and respect for others.
Yeah, absolutely. And just got to love how empowering like learning actual psychology is to, again,
beautiful,
to yourself and all your relationships, which essentially is what makes life what it is like how you relate to others, and how, every new position that you gain, every quality of life is often a very large degree to do with the people that you have in your life. Another thing on that concept too, of like what triggers anger is a feeling of being disrespected. This struck me as well, that oftentimes if there's no one to blame, we like to blame the universe, or if you believe in a sky daddy, you blame God. as a side note, neither of us are atheists, but the Sky Daddy concept is very different, because a God that comes down and saves people and kills other people, that's a God that doesn't actually respect anyone or their own sovereignty or their right to have their own experience that they're having before you came along and, came in.
You need to tell him to fuck off too. Like,
put your hand out of through some clouds and came and did something. Yeah. And so like, it's very interesting. Like when people say like, it's like some kind of sick cosmic joke, or they start believing, well, maybe I'm cursed, right? The mind starts going these weird places that, again, I feel that if you have to root your mindset in sovereignty, personal responsibility above all else, everything else is peripheral to that one central theme. And with that, again, if that's the foundational building block of your trivium, that everything else is going on, that's going to allow you to discern what makes sense. It kind of highlights that not only is it probably not true that you're cursed or that the universe is somehow like throwing sticks in your spokes and wrenches into your plans, and that it's malicious, that it's just something that's playing out either by chance or something perhaps even in your own subconscious behavior, something that you're creating that you don't even realize. And that's kind of an Occam razor situation to me. I'm really not one that buys too much into the idea of divine intervention, whether it's the angels are smiling on you or blessing you or watching out for you, whether it's a positive love and light kind of thing, or the universe is cruel and it's like always trying to prank you. I mean, there's Loki, but that's not the universe. That's just one little aspect of it. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, yeah, and it's an aspect that's like reflecting something within ourselves. But yeah, I think a good way to kind of summarize what the episode is really about here is that you can see that respect is inherent to the universe because of free will and sovereignty, and to acknowledge others' right to experience is by default demonstrating respect because you're taking time to look at them again. So we're all learning, and it's done through observation, which is what respect is all about. Every being has their right to experience and to come to understand, and to do that unmolested. Right. To not have beliefs forced down their throat. Like you can have your spiritual practice, and if you're keeping to yourself, you're not harming anybody, believe whatever you want. But the moment that you're trying to force your beliefs down other people's throat, or demand that they have to hear you out, or that they have to not only hear you out but accept what you're saying, like it's just ultimate truth, and they're not allowed to form their own opinions or their own thoughts, then that's a total, that's a very, very toxic person who operates like that.
Narcissistic,
very narcissistic. Just like we talked about, that would be an example of like a spiritual narcissist, a parasite. So those type of people, respect yourself enough to cut them the fuck out of your life.
Yeah, and when you say respect is inherent to the universe, to take that a little step deeper, it's not that everything is going to have respect for everything else. That's not what we mean. It's that respect is an inherent virtue, like truth, like honesty, like honor. It's a virtue that you can cultivate first by awareness, then by self-discipline. First, again, you have to observe. You have to be looking for those lessons, and then taking them in and integrating them into yourself, your decision-making process. So respect is a virtue. It's something to be worked for. It's worked on, but it's also a natural byproduct of raising your own awareness, not just in the intellect and knowing everything about every little conspiracy or this or that. Even in the occult domain, you can over-intellectualize that knowledge, and without taking it to the heart center and beaming through that and acting through that, you're still missing the point. You're still falling short, and that's where you're at. That's where your lesson lies ahead. But we're trying to paint that light at the end of the tunnel to show, like what respect is versus fear, where it's coming from, where the anger is coming from, what it means, whether it's bad or good. It depends on the situation. And I mean, again, discernment's being painted all through here. This is this, that's that. Let's not get things confused. look at the nuance, look at the details, and most of all, let's see how all the pieces are always fitting together. That's the animistic mindset, paganism.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that covers everything we wanted to share with you guys in this episode. If you enjoyed this, like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Also, go check out thewizardfactory.com. All of our services, packages, and downloads are available there as well. Consultation with astrology, rune readings, personal adaptive consultations. And if you haven't yet, go check out the initiation package. It's front and center on the homepage of the website. It's got a really cool little free course, including how to have stronger boundaries through the energy practice of casting the Circle of the Magi. This is a very realistic tool that you can use if boundaries is something that you struggle with personally, as well as some other cool stuff. And you'll get access to our private Facebook group where we're sharing more exclusive content and trying to cultivate a real community of other people that are thirsty for this knowledge, that not only want to take it in, but they want to feel that connection, that true relation to other like-minded individuals. So definitely check that out. We hope you guys enjoyed this segment. Thank you so much for watching. And until next week, be empowered, be inspired, and be encouraged.